Okay, well, back again. Today, I think we're going to use the same visual aid we had for the last one, but go into some more, excuse me, esoteric details that will help you to understand some of the mysteries of our mysteries. I'm going to title this one, The Secret Other Policemen's Balls and Halls of Records. The Real Holy Grail for followers of Snails' tales. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a Monty Python fan, you know that one of their signature phrases, I think they used it as the title for one of their TV episodes, The Secret Other Policeman's Ball. If you know anything about what a policeman's ball is, you'll know that police departments have traditionally, I don't know if this is a U.S. tradition or a British tradition or both, but there was a tradition of having like a special ball once a year where the policemen could bring their wives and have a really nice affair, dance, and basically behave like lords and ladies for a short time before they hit the streets, hit their beats again. And almost like a Saturnalia, if you will. I think maybe that's where they got the idea. Well, the secret other policeman's ball kind of gives you an image of what the other policemen are doing while the everyday policemen, who are dealing with the actual people, might be doing. And this is a good image for those that are wondering who's really minding the store. I think our police forces today are just as confused about what's going on as the folks that they're supposed to serve and protect. So that's where that comes from. Hall of Records is something you may have heard of if you're into esoteric, mystic traditions. Supposedly there was a Hall of Records under the Sphinx, and that was supposed to hold arcane knowledge and the secrets of the universe, blah, blah, blah. And there was another Hall of Records, which was supposed to be in a temple, which Alexander the Great visited to see if he could figure out what all this interesting stuff that he'd heard from his teacher, Aristotle, was all about. And Aristotle, if you know, is in the line of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And the tales of Atlantis and the version of history that presents is part of that Greek mythology or history, as some are arguing over whether it was one or the other or a mixture. So halls of records are important things, and in fact court records are important halls, internet archives are important halls. And in fact, we're discovering how important they are as people start making documents disappear from them or doctoring documents and putting them back in. And one of the scariest things about the digital age is that you can actually, once you've wiped out all the physical copies of a book, you can basically take the electronic copies and modify the original, make that the only one that gets distributed, and suddenly you've rewritten all sorts of Bibles. Now that's been happening for a long time, so this touches on our subject too. What is the Holy Grail? Well, you ask 1,000 Grail seekers and they'll give you a different answer. Some people have been indoctrinated in the Da Vinci Code and have an idea what the Holy Grail is from that tradition. The earlier tradition that it was the chalice that caught Christ's blood on the cross, and that blood had some magical properties that were passed on to other things that they touched. So the cup of the blood from the Grail could bring you back from the dead, could whatever, consecrate an item. This is one of the reasons why bits of the true cross were venerated. The relics of saints were made important because the story always tied back to some inheriting of this property of the blood of Christ. And the association between Grails and bloods is still in effect by the folks that say, well, the real Holy Grail is the latest scion of the house of Jesus, the direct descendant of Christ. So there's a lot of mysticism about that, and theories going around about secret groups preserving those bloodlines because there's something special. Maybe they're going to be involved in the events that are described in Revelations to some extent. So I'm going to be clearing up all that to the best of my abilities. And you can judge for yourself the veracity of what I tell you. Okay, so let's go back to our visual aid now that we had last time, and let's talk about the first 5 souls again, because this is where all the major patterns of the multiverse started. That's what, you ask anybody, well, how does creation work? And the scientists will tell you that, well, it's about repeating patterns. We look at anything that has order in it, and there are patterns that repeat at a large scale and keep repeating at a smaller scale, just in a different way. This is the nature of fractal. And if you can define the right equation to match the fractal you see, you essentially have a mathematical description of that system. Theoretically, they haven't figured out a way of decomposing, calculating a fractal based upon observation. I don't think. I don't know if anybody's worked too deeply in that, or if they've driven themselves crazy trying. At any rate, the patterns that we started talking about last time, and you see these patterns here, patterns of reproduction, and how diversity is created by making sure that each new entity, be it a soul or be it a soul vehicle, is made up of basically the combination of 2 source entities. This is how sex works. You got to have a man, you got to have a woman. Man gets the woman pregnant and they have a baby. And this is essentially the pattern called a trinity. Okay, so if you look at pretty much any religious tradition, you will find that they are Trinitarian in some dimension of that meaning. In other words, if you look in the Old Testament, you will see that Trinities are mentioned quite a bit in terms of Adam and Eve producing a child, Abraham and Sarah producing a child, Mary and Joseph having a child which wasn't Joseph's, but it was still a child, so it had to have some father, and the Christian story was, oh, well, the father was God. And, that's one way of viewing a trinity. And indeed, the people who worship their bloodlines, which has been pretty much the people that thought they were speaking for God or blessed by God, think that their blood has some special significance. And that special significance generally is tied back to a particular mythology of Trinity. Okay, so where do Trinities come from, and is there one that's more special than another? What I've told you many times is that reincarnation is real. You can prove that to yourself. Go study up the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson and explain it in any other way that doesn't admit of reincarnation. I defy anybody to view that body of knowledge that he has accumulated studying literally thousands of children who have past life memories and come to any other conclusion but that reincarnation is real. Those children have remembered things that they could not possibly have learned any other way. Not through papers, not through news clippings, not through secretly finding the family that had the person in question, etc., etc. You would have had to do as much research as Dr. Ian Stevenson did to prove, to find out all the things that these children knew. And there's just no way that happened, okay? There's no other explanation. I know there's some quote debunkers out there that will tell you that they can debunk the idea of reincarnation. These people are fools. They're either fools or they are actively supporting a cult Marxist agenda, trying to keep the truth away from people because, as we know, the truth can hurt the people who made the lies. Okay, so reincarnation is real. Souls are real. Souls originated with an original soul. Call that God. Okay, and in reproducing, God didn't just make carbon copies of himself. Well, the first soul, he did, because he had no other choice. There was nothing to combine with it but what God had. So he could withhold, he could give this other soul programming, say, well, here's what you can do and you can't do, give them some commandments, if you will. But there was nothing in that soul that wasn't already part of God. That was karma. After that, then a form of reproduction could start happening because the next soul was a combination of God and karma. And this is logical because in order to have the force to make something, you have to overcome the force of not making it. So God and karma had to agree on joining their energy together to make another soul. This is the way it's always been. This is the pattern of Trinity. It's a cooperative effort. If one soul forces themselves on the other soul can abort if they choose to. Or they can disappear and raise the child by themselves in defiance of the other partner, the father. And that's another pattern that can happen out of this. Okay, so ultimately, the very first Trinity was God, karma, and Lucifer. The second Trinity was Lucifer, Lilith, and Borg. And basically, these two Trinities have been the source of all religions. And anti-religions, okay? The religions that are descended from the creation of Borg or Lilith and Lucifer are effectively anti-religions. They are religions that were created without any knowledge of God, or limited knowledge of God, let's say. And that knowledge has been more and more limited the more programming that Lilith and her hive minds, Lilith is the ultimate hive mind queen, in physical creation. All of the hive insects, all of those species that are ruled by one central queen and serve the queen in any way they can, up to and including their death, slavishly, those are hive minds. Okay? And basically, so you've got three kind of trinities at work. The trinities that are modeled like the first trinity are trying to solve family problems. That's the whole reason for this trinity. God and karma. Karma was God's initial programming of a solution to be able to create children that were different from him, but not so powerful that they could actually destroy themselves or destroy God. Because God is a God of creation, a God that loves expansion, loves knowledge to grow, loves art to grow, culture to grow, complexity to grow. This is what the multiverse is all about. And finding a way to govern that so that the growth doesn't overgrow other things is, I mean, anybody that's a gardener knows that if you leave a garden untended, some plants will push out other plants. Some plants will get so busy producing their own kind that they don't get enough nourishment to the center of the plant, and the center of this clump of this plant starts dying, and you get these rings of plants with death in the middle that nothing grows in for a while till that soil is far enough away from the plants that are taking all the nutrients that something that can actually thrive there. Patterns. Okay, the Trinities resulting from Lucifer, the line of Lucifer. Okay, now so remember, Lucifer, all of these cats are reincarnating all the time. That's what reincarnation is about. You can't advance spiritually. You can't create something permanent in the multiverse without paying your dues, without proving your idea by incarnating in the physical universe and proving your idea with the limitations that are imposed by the laws of physics and chemistry. Okay, so now Borg doesn't have kids. Borg is a program. Karma started out as a program, but God let her loose. Said, hey, you know, you've learned enough. I'm going to give you free will now. Borg doesn't have free will. Borg is still running the program that he was created for, because Borg is the chief programmer of programs. Borg is responsible for keeping all the soul vehicles that run on programming and have almost no free will going. And it's very difficult to escape from programming if you are among the species created by Borg. The species created by God, Karma, Lucifer, and Lilith, who have all been working at this game, are different. And there are 4 distinct characters to soul vehicles. The soul vehicles in the line of Lucifer have an idea that they want to overthrow power. They have this righteous need to destroy the power that is and institute their own power. So Lucifer effectively is the god of Marxism. Overt Marxism, that you know, revolutionary, I hate you, I'm going to do everything I can to stop you. Lilith has kind of the same bent, but she's actually more stealthy. Okay, she wants to get people into a hive mind, tell them sweet little lies, and make them want to do the killing of Lucifer and God, in a loving way. We have to go wipe these guys out so that they don't wipe everybody else out. And that's why we need to hate men. And that's why we need to blah, blah, blah. And that's why we need to hate all white people, and except for the white people that give us money and come to our peaceful demonstrations where we riot and destroy black people's businesses and livelihoods. Mind control and delusion and illusion are what the Trinities of Lilith are all about. This Lilithian agenda is what is driving people thinking that it would be a good thing for people not to be able to reproduce. This is what's driving people being indoctrinated to think that it's good to be gay. It's good to be trans. There's nothing good about that. There's nothing noble or virtuous about having a debilitating mental aberration that gets in the way. Yes, you can make life work that way, and maybe through adoption you can even have the joy of raising children, but it's not the same as the joy of having your own children. You're basically dooming yourself to not carrying on your genetic material, unless you put your faith in program solutions, growing copies of your DNA in the lab, which is something that the transhumanist movement is very much trying to push, because then they get to control what you be and market it to the ones who can pay the most for thinking that they control the essence of their children. It's a very materialist way of approaching transhumanism, a very stupid way of approaching it that doesn't understand that you are not your vehicle. This human form that you put makeup on and you wash and clean and try to make look pretty for everybody else is not real. You're not going to get to keep it forever. When you move on, and you will reincarnate and you'll take another vehicle. You really shouldn't get too attached to this one. And you shouldn't get too attached to the idea of using DNA to program other ones. That's not how you're going to live forever. Sorry, DNA worshippers, that's not the way it works. The souls that will get to live forever are the ones that are going to be remembered for their spiritual contributions. The artists, the inspired scientists that set us on a new path, the leaders that forged new nations, new ways of having a culture, for better or worse. I mean, there have been a lot of dark messiahs in that area, but they all actually have contributed to where we are today. Try to imagine what the world would be like without Alexander the Great, what the world would be like without Genghis Khan, what the world would be like even without Napoleon, or Hitler, or Stalin. Very different place. Maybe not so good in some ways, better in other ways. We don't really know. We can only speculate. At any rate, so the real meat of what I want to get to today is that the real Trinity that produces the real Messiah has to have these first three souls come together. It's not easy. God's reincarnating, Lucifer's reincarnating, Karma's reincarnating. And they have to come together in a way such that an incarnation of God is born into the line of Lucifer and meets up with the line of Karma. Now, the lines of Lucifer generally track male to male. I say generally because it's possible for that characteristic to come in the female line, genetics being variable as it is. So I'm not going to say that the folks tracking male descendants are actually doing the right thing. But there is a pattern there. The line of karma is a female line. And this gets back to, the secret other policeman's balls are Luciferian balls. Generally the balls of people, men mostly, who come to dominate cultures, societies, the ruling class, who have the most opportunities, obviously, for spreading their wild oats. And if you've looked at some of the studies, there's some study that says some high percentage of people in the countries that used to be part of the Mongol Empire having some genetic connection to Genghis Khan. The same would be true of other great leaders that had many children. Alexander didn't really have many children, but he did have a couple. Nobody really tracked their descendants too well. The same with Julius Caesar. The same with Augustus, Octavian, the first emperor of Rome. Not a big family there. They did a pretty good job of wiping themselves out. So the Luciferian families are not as cut and dried as you might think. But basically, the families of the rich and famous like to interbreed with each other because they know somehow that they are somehow related to this Luciferian line. And they have the idea that that gives them the right to rule. And that has been reinforced by day 7 of creation, when God was incarnating and learning just like everybody else. And so it wasn't really obvious if you were mating with God or God's incarnation. You had to pretty much take it on faith. Now, the line of karma has been easier to track because it's easier to keep female lines secret. And if you've ever been around a gaggle of women, you know that they generally are pretty good at keeping each other's secrets as long as you're part of the clique, part of their little hive mind, which is the way that females actually act like Lilith too. So telling the difference between a descendant of Karma and Lilith is not easy. The descendants of Karma, the lines of Karma, are not well known. And many of the descendants, the folks tracking female lines, are actually tracking the line of Lilith, thinking that they are tracking the line of the goddess. This is the confusion. There are two original goddesses, there are two original gods. And the Antichrists come from tracking the lines of Lucifer and Lilith. The Christs come from looking for the lines of God and Karma and seeing them come together. So I think this gives me the subtitle for this talk is The Real Trinities versus the Fox Doctrinities. False religions are made up, anti-religions are made up of false trinities. The worship of powerful people and their descendants for simple reasons of power. The incarnations that have more blood from Karma or God tend to be not worshippers of power. they can work within power and try to do good. They tend to be the advisors, the jury, the counselors, not the chief justices, but maybe their research staff. Not the trial lawyer, but the other lawyers that work in their office that help keep them on the right path so the law firm doesn't go belly up with counter lawsuits or get itself in trouble. Any of you who have ever been in a successful organization know that those people, those sort of people that just hang around and make things work and don't call a lot of attention to themselves, they're not real ambitious, but they're very competent and capable. They will take a new role if they're promoted, but they're not seeking out promotion. Those are the folks that have inherited a lot of the nature of karma and God in their soul, and maybe as some of the programming of their soul vehicle. So the evidence of having the blood of God and karma in your soul vehicle is that vehicle is more resilient, more adaptable, less likely to attack itself, less likely to be unable to join together in a common fight against a foe. So this is why healthy species tend to evolve having more of the influence of God and karma. This is the truth of evolution. This is the real truth of what it means when you say survival of the fittest. The fittest are not the most aggressive, the most domineering, the most likely to become leaders of a revolution or thought leaders, leaders of revolutions, the Lucifers and Liliths. It may seem like it, and they may occasionally conduct wars against the descendants of God and karma, especially if they know anything about how the Messiah program works. Because, you see, if these guys know that it's going to take an incarnation of God and karma coming together and producing a child to make the new body for the new Lucifer, who is a little more light than the last one, less likely to be antithetical to God, and more likely to be, you know what, now I see what you're after, Daddy. I get your plan, and I'm going to help convince these dumb Liliths what that plan is, so they can start being more like karma. Seeking out the descendants of karma, not the descendants of my bad versions. The bad boy guys that are gonna hurt them and turn them into bad girls. This is how free will works to make a whole species better over time. And yes, there are forces to overcome. That's why making progress as a soul takes effort. You can't just go to some guru and they pump your head full of mantras and, well, just repeat this 5 times a day and your life is going to be wonderful. That's complete and utter bullshit. It may work for a while until you encounter a problem that breaks through that haze of programming. And that's what it is. They are programming you. There's nothing wrong with programming, but programming is very brittle. Programming will fall apart when it sees situations that are not solved by the program. This is why I preach against this so-called law of attraction. There are people who say, oh, of course it works. I've seen it work. It worked for me. I'm sorry, it's not going to work for you all the time. If you've been lucky, yes, it's possible to throw a coin up and get heads 100 times in a row. In fact, if a god or goddess, one of the descendants of Lucifer or Lilith, or one of the agents of Borg, wants to use you as a sock puppet, they can make that happen. And you can be very successful for a while and become part of their dark agenda and woo other people into darkness. But it's not reality. It's not truth. It doesn't hold up to the scrutiny of the laws of chemistry and physics. And if you break the laws consistently, then you get kicked out of any decent universe that's run by any decent laws. Now, would you want to be living in a world where right now, if you broke a law, you'd be deported to China so you could go have fun with 5 or 6 different variants of COVID that they've released and pushed actively? That's what playing for the bad guys will get you. Once they're done with you, they will dispose of you. They will use you in any which way they want that serves their agenda. At some point, your success is going to turn into failure when it's useful to them to disappoint all your followers that you've been preaching. This is the only way you're going to be able to get anything in your life. You can attract, you can manifest anything, blah, 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 blah. Eventually, those people will fail. They'll be made to look like an ass. Their secret peccadillos, their secret perversions will be exposed. They will be discredited. And their followers will look like fools and feel like fools and will sink into a situation that could be much worse than what they were in before they got sucked into the universe of some fake guru. It's very dangerous stuff. And if you know anybody that has gone through that multiple times in their life, you can end up in some very dark places. Now, you can also end up making spiritual progress through that and learning something and moving on. And I can show you examples of people late in life who've reached a very good place spiritually after going through a lot of darkness. And I can show you people in the worst darkness that they've ever been, having gone through some of the same phases. Some have, dealt with some of the same gurus, followed the same religions, etc., etc. The same political religions, whatnot. So I'm just cautioning you. And I do want you to know that this is a real thing. There will be a time when this pattern comes together and God incarnates, produces a new Lucifer with karma, and we move on from day 7 of creation. We won't have to be testing this system anymore, which means that we won't have to be restricting who can become a god, how they can become one, and what they can do when they become a god. That's what the multiverse is all about. Yes, you can become a god of your own definition. But we weren't letting those gods out of containment until this whole system was perfected. That's why we have stories of old times where the gods were fighting battles up in the sky, where anything was possible. And now those things are not possible. Yes, there are latent spiritual powers that some people have, but they're a far cry from what souls used to be able to do in the leading soul vehicles of the day. You cannot recreate those old soul vehicles. They don't work anymore. They are based on an old version of reincarnation and karma. Sorry, you can't bring back the age of the pyramids. It's not going to happen. Pyramids are a symbol of a bad solution to power. They're very, very solid power that resides at the top, and it's very hard to climb that pyramid. And if you're down at the bottom, it's almost impossible. That's not the way this system works. If you are very precocious, you can advance very quickly to become a god. And this is essentially what we've been testing with this internet age. How quickly somebody can go viral just by saying something that resonates with somebody else, and bang, you're a god. Not a god of a great thing. Can be god of really stupid things. Gods of very dark things. So be careful what you wish for. I don't think I'd want to be the god of toe cheese for an eternity. Not many people worship toe cheese. It's a concept that we have to deal with, and something that I'm sure somebody would be interested in studying. Where does toe cheese come from, and how much of it is foreign matter versus dead skin, and blah blah blah, and how is it increased by the environment and so forth. Yeah, there are people that study things like that. You can be a god of that, and maybe come up with a set of rules that toe cheese obeys, and maybe develop soul vehicles that are less susceptible to toe cheese. Okay, people have that esoteric an interest, and as long as there's enough spiritual energy behind it, that can generate a god that carries that idea forward and adapts it and evolves it. That's what being a god is being able to evolve within a certain frame of influence. Now, the God who made the idea of the multiverse, that is the real God. Will other gods get to be the chief of that project? Maybe, because at some point the most interesting thing in the multiverse may be modern art, neoclassical music. I don't know. God's got different interests. There's nothing that says he's going to be all jazzed up about the multiverse anymore after this day of creation is done. He may decide, well, you know what? Things worked out pretty well. I'm going to let everybody else carry the standard into day 8 of creation. And I'm going to go off to my universe and focus on what I'm really passionate about now, whatever that is. He may do that, and you never see God again. He may go off for a while and then say, you know what? I went to the senior creators universe, and I'm not liking what's going on there. I think I've got to go try to influence these folks a little bit so they don't go down a dark path that undoes all the great work that we've accomplished so far. And if you've seen the news lately, you know that, or even the last few dozen decades, the life force, the soul of a company who started it will go off to do other things like a Steve Jobs, and then come back to try to re-inject the spirit of the company back into it. That's going to happen spiritually all over the place. Now, of course, it's going to come as a different vehicle, not necessarily in the same lifetime. And in fact, if it happens in the same lifetime, you're not really re-injecting anything that you didn't already reject. And so when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, it didn't change Apple. It didn't make Apple better. In fact, it probably started going downhill faster. When, what's the guy, Jack, the Twitter guy, when he came back to Twitter after leaving it, it didn't get better. It got worse. The chance to get better generally only happens in reincarnation. It's very rare for somebody to, quote, learn their lesson within one lifetime, within one soul vehicle. This is why we have the afterlife process. This is why you have the life review. This is when you get to see, in the light of all the souls that are related to you, have similar resonances, have a similar lineage back to the first 5 souls here, and you kind of see where you came from, what your basic makeup is, what you've done with that in the last life to change it, and get to plot a new course. And it's the old nature versus nurture thing. To overcome nature, you've got to nurture very heavily. If you don't want to be, if you were born from the Lilith line, it's very difficult to decide, you know what, I'm not going to try to get somewhere without, by making false images of myself. I'm going to stop being so narcissistic. I'm going to stop trying to make myself look better and focus on making other people look better and helping other people. And then you become more like karma. If you're, very alpha Luciferian go-getter, probably your soul likes to incarnate as a male in a paternalistic society. If society is flipped to become maternalistic and the women rule the roost, those women are going to be Luciferians. So, these folks that think, oh, everything would be perfect if women were in charge, are the biggest numby-gumbies I think I've ever run across. You guys are so far out of touch with the reality of nature. I just don't know how to describe how stupid you are. So these Luciferian souls, if they really want to change their ways, they have to look at, well, what are the fruits of power? You become a target. You become the person that everybody blames when things go wrong. It's very difficult to stay at the top. You've got to work at it. You've got to devote your life and soul to being on top, and at the expense of a lot of other things like having good relationships and time to work on your hobbies and stuff like that. It's not great being a Luciferian soul. And anybody that is trying to push you in a Luciferian or Lilithian direction right now is not your friend. Now, maybe that is what you choose to do, and that is your choice. Nobody's going to take that from you. But after some lives of reincarnation, you're going to realize that those choices are leading you away from the universes of souls that like to play the game like God, or like to play the game like karma. Those universes are going to be less accessible if you like to play the game like Lucifer or Lilith. You can freely choose to play the game that way, but you're going to be isolated. And if you continue to step on other souls, you will reach the same isolation that Borg has, of being a very distinct program of your own creation that can only work through programming, because no other real soul, no other soul with emotions and with a life of its own and with a mind of its own is going to want to play with you. And this is happening on social media right now. There are people that are so Borg-like, so hive-minded, that they cannot stay in the same echo chamber with anybody. They piss off everybody that they come in contact with, because their idea of perfection is so narrow that they can't agree to disagree and still get along with other people and share things that they can agree on. At any rate, I think I've covered this topic pretty well. There's another related topic want to get to, but I'm not going to steal my fire by doing it today because it is a huge, huge bomb to drop on Bible literalists. So if you found this interesting, the next one's really going to blow your mind. Till next time, this is Rob Trump for the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe, and happy karma. It's 2023. What could go wrong? We'll see you next time.